All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a question you've probably wondered about when you see billionaires with their mega yachts and private jets.
So how in the world do some of the wealthiest people on Earth, people who own entire companies, officially report these tiny little salaries, sometimes literally just $1 a year? How do they pay for it all? Well, the answer pulls back the curtain on one of the most powerful financial playbooks out there.
Yeah, it all boils down to what you could call the billionaire's paradox.
You see, on one hand, you've got this insane, visible wealth, a lifestyle that costs a fortune to maintain. But then you look at their tax returns and officially they show surprisingly little income. So, what gives? How is that even possible?
Look, it's not some kind of magic trick. It's actually a very specific and totally legal three-step strategy that completely flips the script on how wealth, cash, and taxes work together.
Okay, so let's get into the playbook itself. And you'll see, it's actually kind of simple in theory, but man, is it powerful when put into practice.
Here they are: buy, borrow, and die. I know it sounds super dramatic, right? But trust me, each of those words points to a really critical part of the plan. Let's dig into how those first two steps work together to basically create tax-free cash. Right, this is really the engine room of the whole operation, using your wealth to get cash for everyday life without ever generating a tax bill.
So it all kicks off with step one, buy. Instead of just sitting on cash, the wealthy put their money into assets that are expected to grow in value. We're talking stocks, real estate, even priceless works of art. Now, here's the kicker. You don't pay a dime in taxes on all that growth, what the pros call unrealized gains, unless you sell. And the whole point is, they almost never sell. Okay, so that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? If all your money is locked up in stocks and buildings and you don't sell them, how do you pay for, your groceries or your next super yacht?
And that's where the second step comes in, borrow. What they do is they walk into a bank and basically say, hey, look at my billion-dollar portfolio. Can you loan me, say, 50 million? And the bank, they look at that collateral and think this is the safest bet ever. So they're more than happy to hand over a massive loan, usually with a crazy low interest rate. So just like that, they get all the cash they need to live their life while their original assets just sit there untouched, getting more and more valuable.
Now, this next part is absolutely everything. The key is that a loan is not considered income. The tax man doesn't look at it as earnings, it's just debt. So all those millions they just borrowed to fund their lifestyle, they get it all completely tax-free. When you put it side by side like this, it's just crystal clear. See, most of us, we get a paycheck and it gets taxed before we even get to spend it. But with this strategy, you get your spending money by borrowing it, which doesn't get taxed at all. It's two totally different paths to getting cash with wildly different tax outcomes. But you're probably thinking, what about the loan? You got to pay that back, right? And that brings us to the final and maybe the most pivotal step.
Okay, this is where the whole thing goes from a clever personal finance trick to a machine for creating multi-generational wealth. It's all about how the story ends.
And that's step 3, die. When the person passes away, they leave behind this massive portfolio of assets that's been growing in value for decades, and, of course, all the loans they took out against it. So, what happens next?
Well, the answer is tucked away in a little corner of the tax code called the stepped-up basis. And what this basically means is that for tax purposes, the price tag on the asset gets a complete reset. The original purchase price, it's like it never happened. The new starting line for the heirs is whatever that asset is worth on the day they inherit it.
And the result of this one little rule is, frankly, mind-blowing. All those decades of growth, all that value that was never ever taxed, it's legally wiped clean. Poof, gone. That huge capital gains tax bill that should have been paid, it just evaporates. So here's what happens. The heirs get this massively valuable portfolio. They can then sell just a tiny piece of it, and since the value was stepped up, they pay basically no tax, and use that cash to pay off the original loans. And then, well, the whole cycle is ready to start all over again with the next generation. So when you step back and look at this buy, borrow, die strategy, what are we supposed to make of it all? There's a quote from one of the sources we looked at that just nails it. They live on debt, grow their wealth in silence, and leave the bill to the tax code. It's a system of using debt to live, letting wealth grow untaxed, and then using the tax code itself to settle the final bill. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Is this just a brilliant financial cheat code, playing the game perfectly by the rules that exist?
Or does it expose a system that's just fundamentally broken, with loopholes big enough to sail a super yacht right through? That's a debate that's not going away anytime soon.